In a time lost in the mists of antiquity, there lived a man whose name would become synonymous with faith, obedience, and the promise of a people. His name was Abraham. He was born into a world where idols were worshipped, where the power of kings and warriors ruled the lives of the common man, and where hope was often a dream in the night. Yet Abraham would begin a journey that would determine not only his own life, but the fate of generations to come. This is the story of Abraham, the patriarch of many nations, the friend of God, and the bearer of eternal promise. Thanks for watching, and give us a thumbs up. Abraham, then called Abram, was born in the city of Ur, a prosperous center of civilization in ancient Mesopotamia. Ur was a city of great temples, where the moon god Nana was worshipped. Abram was the son of Terah, a merchant, and grew up in a world where idolatry was the norm. But deep within Abram burned a longing for something he could not yet fully understand. He felt an emptiness that the idols of his ancestors could not fill. It was in this context that God spoke to Abram. "Leave your country, your kindred, and your father's house, and go to the land that I will show you. I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you and curse him who curses you. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed." This command was incredible. Abram, a man of 75, was to leave behind everything he knew. He had no certainty of his destiny, no promises except those of an unseen God. Yet Abram obeyed without hesitation. He left Ur, took his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, and all their possessions, and began a journey into the unknown. After a long and difficult journey, Abram came to the land of Canaan. This was the land that God had promised to him. Abram pitched his tent by the oak of Moreh near Shechem, and there God appeared to him again. "To your descendants I will give this land," God said. Abram built an altar to the Lord there, as a sign of his gratitude and obedience. However, life in Canaan was not easy. There was a famine in the land, and Abram decided to go to Egypt to find food. In Egypt, Abram was confronted with the weakness of his own faith. Fearing that the Egyptians would kill him for Sarai's beauty, he suggested that Sarai pretend to be his sister. This led to complications because Pharaoh took Sarai into his home. However, God punished Pharaoh, and Sarai was returned to Abram. Ashamed and afraid, Abram left Egypt, but the lesson he had learned was that God was faithful, even when Abram was not. Back in Canaan, after the famine was over, Abram separated from Lot. Lot chose the fertile plains of the Jordan and settled in the city of Sodom, while Abram remained in the mountainous land of Canaan. After this separation, God appeared to Abram again and repeated his promise. "Look around you, northward and southward, and eastward and westward. All the land that you see, to you and to your descendants I will give forever, and I will make your descendants as the dust of the earth." Abram's life in Canaan was again disrupted by war. Conflict broke out in the region between 4 powerful kings and 5 lesser kings of the Jordan Valley, including the king of Sodom, where Lot had settled. The 4 kings defeated the coalition of the 5 kings and took their possessions and inhabitants as prisoners of war, including Lot and his family. When Abram heard that his nephew had been captured, he gathered 318 of his most trained servants and pursued the invaders. He divided his men into groups and attacked them at night. Through his courage and strategic insight, Abram defeated the conquerors and freed Lot and the other captives, while bringing back the plundered possessions. After this successful campaign, Abram returned to Canaan, where he was greeted by the king of Sodom. But before he met the king of Sodom, he was approached by a mysterious figure, Melchizedek, the king of Salem and priest of the Most High God. By the way, do you have an interesting topic for a video? Let us know in the comments. Thanks. Melchizedek met Abram with bread and wine and blessed him. "Blessed be Abram by God Most High, creator of heaven and earth, and blessed be God Most High, who has given your enemies into your hand." Abram recognized Melchizedek's spiritual authority and gave him 1/10 of all he had conquered. The meeting with Melchizedek was of great spiritual significance to Abram. Melchizedek was not only a king, but also a priest of the true God, and his blessing confirmed Abram's relationship with God. This event showed that Abram was not only a great warrior, but also one who understood the spiritual dimension of his mission. The king of Sodom then offered Abram to keep all the possessions he had brought back. But Abram refused. He did not want anyone to be able to say that he had become rich through the king of Sodom. "I lift up my hand to the Lord God Most High, creator of heaven and earth, that I will not take anything from you, not even a thread or a sandal strap, so that you will not say, 'I have made Abram rich.'" This act of integrity and trust in God underscored Abram's determination to depend entirely on God's blessings and not on human favors. Abram was richly blessed with livestock, silver and gold, but one thing was missing from his life: a son. Despite God's promise that he would be the father of many nations, Sarai remained barren. The years passed, and it seemed as if God's promise was fading away. One night, God brought Abram outside and said, "Look toward heaven and count the stars if you are able to number them. That is how many your descendants will be." Abram believed the Lord, and it was credited to him as righteousness. Yet the promise of a child remained unfulfilled. Sarai, desperate to provide Abram with an heir, suggested that he have a child with her maid, Hagar. Abram agreed, and Hagar conceived a son, Ishmael. But this decision brought tension and sorrow to Abram's household. Sarai became jealous and mistreated Hagar, causing Hagar to flee into the desert. Hagar's journey through the desert was a symbol of abandonment and despair. She felt betrayed by Sarai, the woman she had served, and now by Abram, who had failed to protect her. Alone and without hope, Hagar found herself at a spring of water in the desert between Kadesh and Bered. There the angel of the Lord appeared to her. "Hagar, Sarai's servant, where have you come from and where are you going?" the angel asked. Hagar replied, "I am fleeing from my mistress Sarai." The angel said, "Return to your mistress and submit to her. I will multiply your offspring so that they will not be counted. Behold, you are pregnant and will bear a son. You are to name him Ishmael, because the Lord has heard your misery." The angel's promise gave Hagar hope. Ishmael would become a great nation, though he would be a wild donkey of a man, living at enmity with his brothers. Hagar named the place where she met God Bir Lahai Roi, which means the fountain of the living one who visits me. Hagar returned to Abram and Sarai and gave birth to her son, Ishmael. Although Ishmael was Abram's firstborn son, Hagar knew deep down that he was not the son of promise. But God had promised her that her son would become a great nation. Her faith in this promise gave her the strength to continue. When Abram was 99 years old, God appeared to him again. This time God made an everlasting covenant with him. "I am God Almighty. Live before me and be blameless. I will establish my covenant with you and multiply you exceedingly." God changed Abram's name to Abraham, which means father of many nations, and Sarai's name to Sarah, which means princess. God promised Abraham that Sarah would bear a son, and he would name him Isaac. Through Isaac, the covenant would continue. As a sign of this covenant, God instituted circumcision. Every male descendant of Abraham and his household was to be circumcised on the 8th day after his birth. This was to be the sign of the covenant between God and Abraham, a physical mark that would distinguish them as God's people. Abraham obeyed immediately and circumcised himself. Ishmael, who was then 13 years old, and all the males of his household, both those born and purchased on that same day. Shortly after the institution of circumcision, God appeared to Abraham again, this time in the form of 3 visitors. Abraham was sitting at the entrance of his tent in the heat of the day when he saw the men approaching. He hurried over to them, bowed low before them, and invited them to rest and eat a meal. As they were eating, one of the men repeated that Sarah would bear a son in a year. Sarah, hearing this from the tent, laughed to herself. She was old and no longer able to have children. The Lord said, "Why is Sarah laughing? Is anything too hard for the Lord? In a year I will return to you, and Sarah will have a son." Sarah laughed and denied it out of fear. But the Lord said, "No, you laughed." After the meal, the men got up to continue on to Sodom. Abraham went with them to see them off. Then the Lord said, "Should I hide from Abraham what I'm about to do? For Abraham will surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth will be blessed through him. For I have chosen him to command his children and his household after him, to keep the way of the Lord by doing righteousness and justice, so that the Lord may fulfill what he promised Abraham." The Lord then revealed to Abraham that he was planning to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah because of their sins. Abraham, concerned about his nephew Lot, who was living in Sodom, began to plead for the city. "Will you really destroy the righteous with the wicked? Suppose there are 50 righteous in the city. Will you not spare the place for the sake of the 50 righteous who are there?" God agreed to spare the city if 50 righteous were found. Abraham, realizing that there might be fewer righteous, asked further, "Suppose there are 5 fewer than 50 righteous. Will you destroy the city for the sake of the 5?" God replied, "If I find 45 righteous, I will not destroy the city." Abraham continued to plead, and eventually he brought the number down to 10. God agreed to spare Sodom if 10 righteous were found. After this conversation, the Lord departed, and Abraham returned to his place. By the way, don't forget to subscribe and give it a thumbs up. It's appreciated. That same evening, 2 angels arrived in Sodom, where Lot was sitting at the city gate. When Lot saw them, he got up and went to meet them and invited them to stay in his house. The angels finally agreed, but before they went to bed, the men of the city, young and old, surrounded Lot's house. They demanded that Lot hand over the strangers to them so that they could abuse them. Lot went outside to calm them down and even offered his 2 daughters in place of the strangers, but the crowd refused and began to threaten to abuse Lot. The angels quickly pulled Lot inside and struck the men outside with blindness so that they could not find the door. The angels then told Lot to gather his family and leave the city, because the Lord was about to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. Lot warned his sons-in-law, but they laughed at him. At daybreak, the angels urged them to leave. Lot, his wife, and his 2 daughters were led out of the city by the angels. They warned them not to look back or stand still, but to flee to the mountains for their lives. As they fled, the Lord rained down sulfur and fire from heaven on Sodom and Gomorrah, and the cities were completely destroyed. The fertile plain of the Jordan, which Lot had previously chosen, was turned into a barren wasteland. Lot's wife, who looked back despite the warning, was turned into a pillar of salt. Lot and his daughters eventually reached a small town called Zoar, but fearing for their safety, they fled further into the mountains. There, in a secluded cave, a tragic situation arose. Lot's daughters, thinking that there were no men left on earth to continue their father's line, devised a plan. They gave their father wine to drink, and in their drunkenness had sexual relations with him. Both daughters became pregnant and bore sons. The older son became the father of the Moabites, and the younger the father of the Ammonites, both peoples who would later become enemies of Israel. Abraham then left the territory of Sodom and settled in the land of the Philistines, between Kadesh and Shur. There he stayed in the city of Gerar, where King Abimelech reigned. Again, out of fear that his wife Sarah would be desired because of her beauty, Abraham told her that she was his sister. Abimelech, who was unaware of the truth, took Sarah to himself. But before he could see her, God appeared to Abimelech in a dream and warned him, "Behold, you are a dead man because of the woman you have taken, for she is a man's wife." Abimelech, who considered himself and his people innocent, replied, "Lord, will you also destroy a righteous nation? Didn't he himself say to me, 'She is my sister'? And she herself also said, 'He is my brother.' In the integrity of my heart and in the innocence of my hands I have done this." God recognized Abimelech's innocence and commanded him to give Sarah back to Abraham, because Abraham was a prophet and would pray for him so that he would live. The next morning, Abimelech called his servants together and told them what had happened. Then he called Abraham and asked him why he had brought such great danger on him and his people. Abraham explained that he feared for his life because there was no fear of God in the land. He also told them that Sarah was indeed his half-sister, the daughter of his father but not of his mother, and that he had married her. Abimelech gave Sarah back to Abraham, along with sheep, cattle, and male and female servants, and offered him land to settle wherever he wanted. He also gave Abraham 1,000 pieces of silver as a token of honor for Sarah, so that everyone would know that she was intact. After this incident, Abraham prayed for Abimelech, and God healed Abimelech, his wife, and his maidservants, that they might bear children again. For the Lord had closed the wombs of all the women of Abimelech's house because of Sarah, Abraham's wife. At the appointed time, Sarah bore a son, just as God had promised. Abraham named him Isaac, which means laughter, because both parents had laughed at God's promise. Isaac was the child of promise, and he brought joy and fulfillment into the lives of Abraham and Sarah. On the 8th day after his birth, Isaac was circumcised, as God had commanded. This ritual was the sign of the covenant between God and Abraham, a confirmation that the promise would now be carried by Isaac too. Sarah, who had suffered for years with the shame of barrenness, said at the birth of Isaac, "God has made me laugh, and everyone who hears this will laugh with me." Isaac was proof that God kept his word, even when all human hope had vanished. Years later, when Isaac was a young man, God put Abraham to the ultimate test. "Take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah. Offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains that I will show you." This command was overwhelming. Isaac was not only Abraham's beloved son, but also the heir to God's promise. How could God ask him to give this up? Yet Abraham obeyed. Early in the morning, he saddled his donkey, took Isaac and 2 of his servants, and set out for the land of Moriah. 3 days later, he saw the place in the distance. He left the servants and went up the mountain with Isaac, carrying the wood for the burnt offering on Isaac's shoulders. As they were walking, Isaac asked, "Father, the fire and the wood are here, but where is the lamb for a burnt offering?" Abraham answered, "My son, God will provide the lamb." They went on until they came to the place God had told them. Abraham built an altar, laid the wood on it, bound Isaac, and laid him on the altar. As he reached out his hand to take the knife, an angel of the Lord called to him from heaven, "Abraham, Abraham, do not touch the boy or do anything to him. Now I know that you fear God, because you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me." Abraham looked up and saw a ram caught in a thicket by its horns. He sacrificed the ram instead of his son and named the place, "The Lord will provide." The angel of the Lord called to Abraham again and confirmed the promise. "Because you have done this and have not withheld your son, I will surely bless you and make your descendants as numerous as the stars of the sky and as the sand on the seashore. In your descendants all the nations of the earth will be blessed, because you have obeyed my voice." And Sarah, Abraham's wife, died at the age of 127, and Abraham mourned for her. He bought a plot of land in Machpelah to bury her, and that became the first property Abraham owned in the Promised Land. A few months later, the time had come. Abraham had to find a wife for his son Isaac to secure the line of promise. Isaac had grown up in the shadow of his father's tents, aware of his unique role as the heir of God's promises. He was a young man of character and faith, but as the years passed, Abraham began to worry about the future. Isaac had no wife, and it was of the utmost importance that the line of promise should continue through a wife who had the same devotion to the Lord as his family had. Abraham remembered the covenant God had made with him, and he knew that the future mother of the offspring of promise must come from his own family, from his own people. So one day Abraham called his oldest and most trusted servant. This servant, probably Eliezer of Damascus, had been in Abraham's service for many years and had served his master through many trials and blessings. Abraham gave him a very important and confidential assignment. "Put your hand under my thigh," Abraham said, according to the custom of that time for confirming an oath, "and swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and earth, that you will not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites in the land where I live, but you will go to the land of my father's house and take a wife for my son Isaac from there." The servant listened attentively and asked, "What if the woman is unwilling to go with me to this land? Should I then take your son back to the land from which you came?" Abraham answered with deep conviction, "Do not take my son back there. The Lord, the God of heaven, who took me from my father's house and from the land of my relatives and who spoke to me and made this promise to me, will send his angel before you, and you will take a wife for my son from there. But if the woman is unwilling to go with you, then you are free from this oath, but do not take my son back to that land." The servant swore according to Abraham's words and prepared for the long journey to the land of Mesopotamia, to the city of Nahor, where Abraham's family lived. He took with him 10 of his master's camels, as well as precious gifts, to impress the family of the future bride. The journey was long and dangerous, but the servant trusted in the God of Abraham to guide him. After many days of travel, the servant reached the city of Nahor. He rested his camels at a well outside the city, at the time when the women of the city would come to draw water. The servant, realizing the immense task ahead of him, prayed to the Lord, "O Lord God of my master Abraham, please grant me success today and show your kindness to my master Abraham. Here I am standing by the well of water, and the daughters of the men of the city are coming to draw water." May it be that the girl to whom I say, 'Let down your pitcher that I may drink,' and who says, 'Drink, and I will give your camels a drink also,' that she is the one you have appointed for your servant Isaac. By this I will know that you have shown kindness to my master." While he was still praying, a young woman came to the well. Her name was Rebekah, the daughter of Bethuel, the son of Milcah, the wife of Abraham's brother Nahor. Rebekah was very beautiful in appearance, and yet a virgin. No man had known her. She was carrying a pitcher on her shoulder, and Abraham's servant hurried to her. "Please let me drink a little water from your pitcher," the servant asked. Rebekah answered gently, "Drink, my lord," and hurried to lower her pitcher into her hand. After he had drunk, she said, "I will also draw water for your camels until they have drunk enough." The servant watched in amazement as Rebekah, without hesitation, continued to draw water from the well until all of his camels had quenched their thirst. This was no small task, for thirsty camels could drink large quantities of water. The servant was amazed and knew that his prayer had been answered in a wonderful way. When the camels had finished drinking, the servant took a gold nose ring and 2 bracelets and gave them to Rebekah. He asked her, "Whose daughter are you? Please tell me. Is there room in your father's house for us to stay overnight?" Rebekah answered, "I am the daughter of Bethuel son of Milcah, whom she bore to Nahor." And she said, "We have both straw and fodder enough, and also a place to spend the night." The servant knelt down and worshipped the Lord and said, "Blessed be the Lord, the God of my master Abraham, who has not withheld his kindness and faithfulness from my master. The Lord has led me on the way to the house of my master's brothers." Rebekah ran quickly to her mother's house to tell her family what had happened. When her brother Laban heard the story and saw the jewelry, he hurried to the well to meet Abraham's servant. Laban greeted him warmly and invited him into the house. A meal was prepared, but before he ate, the servant said, "I will not eat until I have said what I must say." Laban and Bethuel said, "Speak." The servant told them all about his master Abraham, the birth of Isaac, and how God had blessed him and led him to their family. He explained how he had prayed at the well and how Rebekah had done exactly as he had asked in his prayer, and therefore he believed that she was the woman God had appointed for Isaac. After hearing the story, Laban and Bethuel replied, "This is from the Lord. We cannot add anything to it. Here is Rebekah. Take her and let her be the wife of your master's son, as the Lord has spoken." The servant knelt down again and worshipped the Lord, grateful for his guidance. He gave Rebekah precious gifts of gold and silver, as well as clothing, and also gave gifts to her brother and mother. Then they ate and drank and spent the night. The next morning the servant asked to say goodbye, but Rebekah's family asked if they could stay 10 more days to say goodbye. The servant, anxious to complete his mission as quickly as possible, asked them not to delay. They called Rebekah and asked her, "Will you go with this man?" Rebekah replied firmly, "Yes, I will go." So Rebekah set out with her servants and Abraham's servant, heading for the land of Canaan. As they traveled, Rebekah reflected on the wonderful way God had led her. She had never met Isaac before, but she felt a deep peace and confidence that she had made the right choice. Meanwhile, Isaac was meditating in the field when he looked up and saw the camels approaching. When Rebekah saw him, she quickly got off her camel and asked the servant, "Who is that man over there coming toward us in the field?" The servant replied, "He is my master." She covered her face with a veil according to the custom of that time and approached him with reverence. The servant told Isaac all that had happened, how God had led him, and how he had found Rebekah. Isaac then brought her to the tent of his mother Sarah, who had recently died, and took Rebekah as his wife. He loved her, and she comforted him after the loss of his mother. The marriage of Isaac and Rebekah was not only a romantic encounter, but also an important step in continuing God's promise to Abraham. Rebekah became the mother of Jacob and Esau, the next generation in the line of promise. Her faith, courage, and obedience to God's leading made her a worthy wife for the heir of the covenant. Abraham lived many years after he saw Isaac and Rebekah marry. He saw his son become happy and the beginning of a new generation in his family. Abraham himself married again to a woman named Keturah and had 6 more sons: Zimran, Jokshan, Medan, Midian, Ishbak, and Shua. These sons became the forefathers of many nations, But Abraham gave all his possessions to Isaac, for he was the son of promise. At the blessed age of 175, Abraham died in peace, full of life. He had served his God faithfully and seen God's promises begin to be fulfilled. Abraham was buried by his sons Isaac and Ishmael in the cave of Machpelah, next to his beloved wife Sarah. This place, located in the land of Canaan, became the resting place of the forefather of many nations, the man who believed in the invisible God and was declared righteous by his faith. Abraham's life was an extraordinary journey of faith, obedience, and deep friendship with God. From his calling in Ur to his death in the Promised Land, Abraham was a pioneer in faith, blazing a new trail for the relationship between God and humanity. His story does not end with his death, for his legacy lives on through his descendants, who have become as numerous as the stars in the sky. In Isaac, Jacob, and their descendants, the promise continued until it was finally fulfilled in Jesus Christ, the Son of God, who came through the line of Abraham and brought blessing to all the nations of the earth. Abraham's faith was a foreshadowing of the greater faith to come, a faith that could move mountains and change the world. Thus, Abraham lives on, not only in the pages of the Bible, but in the hearts of all who follow in his footsteps of faith. He was a friend of God, a father of many nations, and a light to the nations. His life calls us to trust God's promises, to walk in obedience, and to become like him, a friend of God. Thanks for watching this video about the life of Abraham. Watch more videos on our YouTube channel and subscribe for more videos to come. Do you have an interesting topic for a future video? Let us know in the comments. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Thanks again, and God bless you and your family. Until next time.